Hi everyone, this is Alexandre Galin. So I'm going to give a little quick tips about using the Gumball. Some of you may not be familiar with it, so I thought it would be useful for you to present you this little device that helps you be more productive. Okay, so let's create a cube. I'm going to go to the main toolbar, left click on the cube icon, or what it's called the box in Rhino. So left click on that. I'm going to type the first corner in 0, right click for enter. And you can see that I have this outline of a rectangle. So now I need to define the exact dimensions. So I'm going to type 50 in the X direction, right click. Now I need the Y direction, so I'm going to type 50 again, right click, and then in the Z direction, 50. All right, so I've got a cube of 50 units in the X, Y, Z. And I used to say, like, we're talking like prior to Rhino v5, if I'm not mistaken. In the toolbox here, in the main toolbar here, if I expand under this icon, which is the move icon, if I expand this this toolbar, you can see that I've got what we call the transform toolbar. So the basic transformation tools are the move, copy, rotate, you've got the scale, and you've got the mirror functions. But the ones that you use quite often, well, the ones that I want to focus more my attention, because the mirror is something that you use often actually, it's the scale, rotate, copy, and move. And I'm going to show you, like, instead of using these functions on the main toolbar, you've got a device called the Gumball that can do all of these functions, okay? So it makes you even more productive. So to activate the Gumball, you just go down on the screen. You can see here it's written in very thin letters, Gumball, and between parentheses, C-plane. Just left click on that and turn it in bold. That means you activated the Gumball. And whenever you select an object, in this case, it's going to be my cube. So if I click on my cube, you're going to see this axis system. It's a localized axis system on the selected object. And what you can see here, it's a this 3-axis system. The one with the arrows, this is to move your object around. The one with these handles that you see, that I'm highlighting right now, these are for scaling. And these ones, the arcs, these ones are for rotate, okay? And so if I want to move my object, it's like any other devices, like any gizmos, I just bring my cursor where the red arrow is, for example, of my gumball, and if I left click and maintain the pressure, I can drag it, okay? So I can drag it sideways along the X direction, along the Z direction, the Y direction, and so on, okay? But obviously, you're not going to be eyeballing all the time. Sometimes you need something that is a bit more precise. So if you need to enter some units, well, all you have to do is bring your cursor where there's the red axis, okay, of my gumball. And if I left click on it, you're going to see a little box with, at the beginning, there won't be any values. You're just going to see a box, and it's asking you to put some input in there. So you can type any distance you wish. So I can type, for example, 13 units along this this red axis, which is the X direction. So 13 units in the X direction, and there you have it. So if I want to push it up, I just left click on the blue axis of my icon, and I type 26, and it's going to go up by 26 units like that. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Obviously, if I select my object and I want to move it this time along the Y direction, I left click on the green arrow, and you can add decimal distances. So 13.675, for example, units, and there you go. It's going to move it to that exact distance, okay? You can also, I don't use it often, but you can also put some equations in there. For example, I don't know why you would do it specifically, but sometimes some of you might be interested in knowing that. It's that if I left click on this green arrow, I can type 14 divided by 2, and it's going to move it by 7 units. Okay? So you can also enter equations. Now, if I select my object again, I've got the gumball, we've got these handles here. And I told you these ones are for scaling. If I want to do a uniform scale, all you have to do is press the Shift key And with the Shift key pressed, you just left click on either one of these arrows, and I'm going to do a uniform scale. So it's a 3D scale basically, like this, right? Okay. There you go, simple as that. So I can go to the green handle, it's going to yield the same result because it's scaling in in the three direction, the X, Y, Z, okay? Now, if I want to do a non-uniform scale, you just left click, you don't press anything on the keyboard, just left click and select, for example, in this case, I'm going to select the green handle, and I'm doing a non-uniform scale along the Y direction, okay, of my construction plane. I can do the same with the X direction like this, and I'm doing a non-uniform scale. And if I select the blue one, I do a non-uniform scale, okay? If I want, I can also give a ratio, okay? So, for example, if I want to do a non-uniform scale and make it smaller along the X direction, right, by 50%. So I can input a ratio. I just left click on the red handle, and I'm going to type 0.5, and it's going to shrink it by 50% in that direction only, okay? If I want to increase this one by 50%, I just left click on the blue handle. So let me position myself so that you can see better. So I'm going to left click on the blue handle, and I'm going to say 1.5. That means I'm increasing by 50%, okay? So you obviously can use any ratio you want, 0.33 for 33%, and so on, okay? So 1 being 100%, if I want to shrink it by 85.2% for whatever reason, I just, for example, left click on the green handle here, and I type 0.85, 85.2. And there you have it, okay? So I can do that. You can also enter, like I said, like fractions if you wish. You can do that as well. Okay, so this is for scaling. You've got the non-uniform and the uniform scaling like this. And then there's the arcs. So this is for rotate. So if I left click on this blue arc, for example, you're going to see this circle with arrows pointing in the counterclockwise direction. Okay. So that means when you see the arrows pointing in this direction, that means if you put a positive value, so let's say 45 degrees, it's going to rotate counterclockwise by 45 degrees. So I press enter, and there you have it. If I do the same, this time I click on the blue arrow again, but let's say that I want to do clockwise, so against the direction of the arrows. So I'm going to type minus 33.33, for example. And it's going to rotate by this value of 33.33 degrees, basically. Okay, simple as that. Obviously, you can also eyeball it. So you just left click and drag any one of these arcs, and you can rotate your object like this, okay? Now, whenever I start playing with my object, and then I start moving around, and then I deselect my object, look at my gumball, okay? If I deselect my object and I select it again, the gumball will realign itself with the construction plane that I have by default, which is the X, Y, and Z construction. Well, the construction plane is placed on the XY plane, okay? And you can see that the gumball will align itself with this construction plane, and it's not aligned with my object anymore, okay? So to solve this problem, so let's say that I want to work on that face here, okay? If I select my object, you can see how it's aligned, and you should be able to see a little white handle of your gumball, okay? So if I left click on this white handle, you've got a menu that shows up, okay? And the one that is that I'm looking for is relocate gumball. So I'm going to relocate that. It's going to ask me in the command line the gumball's origin point, okay? So I'm just going to use the snapping object here to the snapping toolbar. So I'm using right now Rhino V8. If you're using earlier version, your snapping toolbar should be at the bottom of the screen here, okay, if you follow my cursor. So in Rhino V8, they changed the layout a little bit, no big deal. So I'm just going to uncheck everything and make sure that endpoint is only snapped. And with the Gumball origin point, I'm just going to place my cursor at the first origin point here at this corner, okay? So I'm going to snap at this corner. So that's the center of my gumball, and then I'm going to place at the other end over there and this end here. And you can see my gumball being relocated as I'm snapping, okay, to each corner. So now when I deselect and reselect my object, I think it's only in Rhino V8 and V7 they solved this issue. With earlier versions of the Gumball, you don't have this luxury of relocating and it's maintained, right? So I think in V6 and V5, if I'm not mistaken, whenever you deselect, the Gumball will be reinitialized at the center and it's going to be parallel to the construction plane. I could be mistaken, but I think that's what happened with the earlier version, and it was irritating. Now they solved it in Rhino V7 and V8. It should maintain its position at the corner and not being recentered. All right, so now that I've got the gumball, properly aligned along that face, now I can move it along this direction, or I can about this center point here, the end point here, I can rotate about this point here, as you can see. And obviously, I can enter specific values if I wish to. Okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah, and that's it. And I can move it along this edge by a specific value. So I click on the green arrow, and let's say by 25 units in the positive direction, it's going to move it here. If I want to move it back, obviously, I just left click and I type a negative value. So minus, I don't know, 50 units, and it's going to move it in the opposite direction by inputting a negative value. Simple as that, okay? And if you want to put the gumball back to its initial state, you just go and left click on the white handle, and you can do a reset gumball. There you go. So if I select my object again, there's my gumball that is aligned with the construction plane, all right, that is parallel to the construction plane, and that is basically not aligned with the object, okay? So again, if I want to realign, I just left click on the white handle, I do relocate gumball, and then I just snap to this endpoint, S endpoint, and that endpoint, and there you have it. Okay, now let me explode this solid. Now you see it's a box, and I'm just going to click on the explode icon here. I'm going to deselect everything. So now that I've exploded, you can see that I've got all the different faces here. Okay, if I select that face here, okay, I still have my gumball, and it's still positioned at the corner where I specified it. But you're going to see something new now. You're going to see a sphere. And that sphere, whenever you see a sphere, that means you can extrude. In this case, I can only extrude along this direction. So if I left click on that sphere, I'm just going to pull it up like that. And now I've created a new box like that. Okay. Let me put a point. No, not a point. Maybe just a line. Let's take a line. Let's draw a line that goes along this direction like that. And let's just select that line this time. If I select that line, you can see 3 spheres. Okay, so that means if I left click on that sphere and I go upwards, I'm going to do an extrusion along the Z direction. If I go with the red sphere and I pull it along this direction, I'm making an extrusion along the X direction. And if I select, so if I select, where's my line? Let me see. Let me hide this. Yeah, and there's my line here. And if I go on the blue one, well, actually, if I select my line again, and this time I just left click on the blue sphere, I can type a distance also. So if I type 14, and it's going to do an extrusion of 14 units in the Z direction. Okay, so I'm just going to Control Z, Control Z to go back to my box. There you go. Okay, so you on top of these arcs and the handles and the axis, you will also notice the blue spheres, and this is for extrusion. Now let me explode this box again. A little shortcut as well. That was prior, I think that's new in Rhino V7 that you had the spheres, okay? In V6 and V5, you won't see that, okay? So that was newly introduced in Rhino V7 when you see that little sphere on your gumball. Before that, for those who are using V7, sorry, V7, V6 and V5, if I select, for example, that face and you don't have that blue sphere, what you could do is you press the control key on your keyboard, and while you maintain the control key pressed and you left click, for example, in this case, it's going to be the blue axis, and I maintain the pressure and I left click and pressing control at the same time, I'm doing the same thing. I'm doing an extrusion basically, okay? So you just, let me explode it again, this box, select that face, for example. Well, I need to relocate. I'm going to relocate quickly my gumball. So I'm going to snap to this endpoint, and that point here. And again, I select that face and I press Control and the left click on the blue axis, and then I can do my extrusion. Or if you just left click once while maintaining the Control key pressed, you can specify a distance also, all right, for your extrusion. So that's what I would have done if I were using V6 and V5. The other thing I want to talk, whenever you want to modify, okay, so I had this question coming often towards me when I was playing with an object, and when I was rotating, if you right click on your mouse and you rotate about an object, okay, it works pretty well in most cases, but in certain cases, you may notice that, especially if you've got experience with other tools, other software like CATIA, SolidWorks, it was very practical in those in these softwares how it would orbit around an object, okay? And in Rhino, you know, with the older version especially, we didn't have that capability to orbit around an object. So it was called orbiting. They solved this problem with the latest versions of Rhino. So I'm just going to reset my gumball first of all. So let's just relocate here. So then whenever I click on this object, now it's only it's focused perfectly centered on this object here, but the axes are parallel to the construction planes, as you can see. And they solved this problem of orbiting. So some of you may not be aware of it, but when I select my object and you have the Gumball activated, just right click on the Gumball tab, and you should see in the menu, here it says rotate view around Gumball. And just make sure that it's checked. In my case, it was always checked, and I always check it, okay? But if I unchecked it, you may notice that when I rotate, now you can see when I rotate, it's not rotating about the object. It's rotating, I'm not sure, I wonder if it's not rotating about the origin point of my construction plane. But when I use the right mouse button, you see the way it rotates, it doesn't feel like it's orbiting about an object. If I select my object, even if I select my object, it's not orbiting around, okay? You can see that. Well, I can feel it and I can see that, okay? So you have to try it on your own. If I right-click on Gumball and I activate, so rotate view around Gumball, and then I select my object here, now I can see that I'm orbiting exactly around my Gumball. And that's very, very convenient in my opinion. So what I do personally is that I always make sure that rotate view around Gumball is checked, okay? I don't know if in the earlier versions, if you right-click on the Gumball menu, it shows here. Okay, what I suggest is because this is Rhino V8, the menu is way more exhaustive than the previous versions. You can also go to Tools, Options. Okay, and in Tools Options, go and find where it says Gumball, and you should be able to find it. So let me see where it is. Modeling aids. There you go. So in Rhino V8, it's hidden under modeling aids, and it's here, Gumball, okay? And you've got here, again, the same menus, same options. Here you can rotate your view around the Gumball, so I would leave it checked. You know, personally, I like that. I like to have it at smooth Gumball. You can change the color of your axis. Definitely, the menu bar, it's in white. So I leave them by default, but you can customize them if you wish. And this is new in Rhino V8. You can play with the thicknesses of your arcs, your axes, and so on, okay, and the scale handle. You can play with these. I'm not sure if in V7 and earlier versions you can do that, but that's pretty convenient. So if you want to play with the settings for your Gumball, you just go under Modeling Aid, unscroll the menu, and you should see Gumball, okay? So that's it for the Gumball. I think I covered pretty much the essentials. And if you want to learn more about the Gumball, just type the F1 on the keyboard. And so let me do it right now. Type F1, you're going to have the help menu, and you can just, in the browser, type Gumball, press enter, and you're going to have different options here, and it's going to give you more details, right? So more explanations, and there should be also some little videos like here, it's little animations to show you how the Gumball works, okay? But what I just explained it to you, it covers like the essentials, and you should be quite comfortable with it. Now, some of you have asked me in the past, and I had many, many questions about it. How do I make the smooth rotations? I'm not using the Gumball and I'm not using my mouse. How do I make the smooth transition of zooming in, zooming out, as you can see? So I've created this 3D model of the McLaren F1 GTR, and I'm using a 3D mouse, okay? It's made by 3D Connection. So some of you, if you've got, you know, a budget allocated for your CAD tools, I'm using a 3D mouse basically. It's a knob, and I can rotate very smoothly, and I can zoom in, zoom out, and it's super powerful. Okay, so if I go to the website and I go to 3D Connections, here it is. That's the company. So I'm using this space mouse here. Okay, but and you know it depends on the budget that you want to allocate for your CAD tools. You can also use this one, okay? The first one that I used was this. It's mainly intended for people who have a laptop, you know, because you have to carry along and it's very lightweight, so it's very convenient. And it's a 3D mouse. It's not only for laptops. I use it for my desktop for many, many years. And, you know, it's about $100. I paid $100 in the past. Let's see if I click on buy now. So the price for a space mouse is 399 Canadian, and the wireless mouse compact, it got more expensive. So it used to be $100, now it's $150. Okay, so is it in American or Canadian? Let me see, Canadian. Sorry about that. I just want to make sure that I'm not saying anything stupid, but you can look it up for yourselves. You know. So you have an idea for the price, right? So it's about 150 to 400 for this 3D space mouse. This one you can program it and add shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts like extrude, cut, move, etc., etc. You can definitely program a lot of shortcuts in here. But I would say this one is already a significant improvement. But like I said, when I go back to my model and I use the 3D space mouse, you can see a little blue spheres here, and it's rotating about this object here. And that's what I'm seeing, okay? So it's very, very cool. And it's also a very powerful zoom. So I can zoom in to specific details and zoom out, and it's very smooth. So I do recommend it. It's a very good tool. For those who are not using the 3D space mouse, because I know that the zoom capability is not an issue, but sometimes in Rhino, when you use the mouse, and for whatever reason, if you're trying to zoom in, and sometimes you can feel that it's going to block for whatever reason, you cannot zoom in closer. I don't know why it's like that, but it does happen, okay? So what I do recommend sometimes, when you're in a situation where you cannot zoom in closer, let's say that it sort of blocks, and I'm sure that some of you may agree or understand what I'm saying. I have a little tip for you. Sometimes what I like to do is I just use the point tool. I'm going to snap in endpoint on my snapping toolbar, and I'm going to place a point here, for example. Okay, and let's say that I want to zoom closer where that point here is. So if I left click on the point here, and if I go to my standard toolbar, up there's this icon called Zoom Selected. So it's going to zoom to that selected geometry that you're highlighting right now. So you can see where my gumball is situated. So I just left click on Zoom Selected on my standard toolbar, and it's going to zoom in closer, and then I press Control, and I right click to zoom out, and now I can zoom in closer and out. Okay, so just simply put a little point in a specific area that you want to zoom in. All right, so place the point, for example, here, select that point, okay? And just left click on the zoom selected in the standard toolbar, and it's going to bring it much closer, and then you can press Control and zoom out, okay? So that's a little tip for you guys if you're not using a 3D mouse from 3D Connection, okay? So I hope that was very helpful for you. I hope you learned a few things, and I thank you for your attention. Take care.